Hey there, audio friends, welcome back to the channel, and I've got a pretty interesting device to review for you today. It's an all-in-one DAC amp that is pretty special in my opinion. It is the Fiio R7. Now, you can see I've got this thing plugged in, and that's because there's just so much to talk about with this thing. It's just so different really from any other device that I've reviewed that's a DAC amp, and so I wanted to have it plugged in so I can kind of show you here some of the things that it can do. And you know, I've been genuinely impressed with it. I've been impressed with the functionality. I've been impressed with the sound. I think it's a great option for somebody that doesn't want to use their phone to control their device and doesn't want to be at a computer. I think for that purpose, this thing, I mean, I don't even know what else you'd get, I guess. So let's look at this device. It's very cool. Ultimately, we'll break it down into like kind of features and what it can do, how it sounds, and then whether I think it's worth the money. Okay, so I mean, the first thing that you're going to notice about this device when we're looking at it is it looks a lot like a phone, and it is a lot like a phone. I mean, this thing is running Android. It really behaves just like a phone, except, you know, obviously it's huge and you can't make calls on it. But outside of that, I mean, it works just like a phone does. So if you're familiar with the Android operating system, like I think you're going to feel right at home here. And I suppose you could even download something, you know, like Facebook Messenger, and maybe you could make a call with it or something like that if you really wanted to. But let's pause on that for a little bit. I mean, outside of that, you've got a volume wheel here. You've got a selection down here that lets you switch from, you know, pre-outs, low, high gain. It just lets you do a number of different things, and you can kind of control a lot of this stuff. You can customize in the menus. XLR, 4.4 Penticon, 1/4 inch. Okay, on the back, you know, it's a very full-fledged DAC amp, right? So it's got line outs, it's got line ins, you can do optical in, optical out, you can do DC power instead of AC power, you have a LAN input, it does Bluetooth, you can put in USB media, you can plug it into your computer, it can do all of that stuff. And if we push this button here, you're gonna see it's got several different modes that you can enter into, right? So we got Android mode, AirPlay mode, Bluetooth mode, Rune Ready, optical mode, coax mode, USB DAC mode, and pure music mode. Okay, so there's all sorts of different things. I am going to be honest with you in that I didn't use a lot of these. I mainly use this as a standalone device. Every now and then I would Bluetooth my phone into this, but that was a pretty rare situation. Normally I was just kind of using this at my bedside, which I liked because I didn't have a computer and I didn't want to use my phone, so this allowed me to control all my streaming stuff natively without having to use Bluetooth or anything like that. That was how I mainly used this device. Okay, so in addition to like ins and outs and things like that, let's take a look at some of the settings that you can change that you might want to look at. First of all, the thing that when I first got this, because Apos sent this out to me, they're not paying me for this review. I'm not getting anything out of this. I will use an affiliate link to them down below, but outside of that, you know, they're not asking me to say anything specific about it. When I first got it though, it was like glaringly bright. And that, because I'm using it on my bedside table, that just wasn't going to fly. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I can change these settings. Luckily, you can turn the screen brightness basically all the way down. So you got some other settings in here that you can control, like your volume knob. And in here, we can change it. So I can turn, you can see how I can turn that like way up on blast. And then you can also like change all the colors and things like that. You can do it based on audio format. You can make it pulse. You can change it, you know, into any color you want. So all that's like pretty cool, right? I'm just gonna go ahead and set it on pulsing here while we're talking. So I like the LED lights. I like that you have full control over it. This would be a really annoying feature if you couldn't control it to such an extent that you can. So I am very thankful that they chose to give the user a lot of control over this. Okay, so outside of that, right? Again, you're controlling this just like an Android device. You can do lots of different things with it, but I'm mainly going to talk about how I used it, which is running the Android mode and then running YouTube Music. I would say that this runs perfectly. There's no hiccups. I never ran into an issue when I was using this in this way. Again, I don't use Rune. I'm not a Tidal user. I'm not a Spotify user. I pay for YouTube Premium, so I listen to YouTube Music. So, but I think any sort of native Android app, and you're gonna do just fine with this thing. AirPlay did work just fine. I did try that out, and Bluetooth did work just fine. But again, I mainly used it Android mode, running YouTube Music. As far as functionality goes, I found it to be a perfect device for that situation, with one exception, and that is this did not come with a remote, and that seems glaringly like lacking to me. That such a full-featured device that can do so many things would be released and they wouldn't include a remote. I mean, geez, I've got like a $90 DAC amp over here from some no-name Chinese brand, and it comes with a remote, right? Like, so to have a device that's $600-700 and it doesn't just come with a remote, that seems obvious to me. So what I ended up using with it most of the time to solve that problem, because I don't really want to be tapping and swiping at a screen, at night when I'm trying to change songs, is I use this little volume wheel from Fozzy that they sent. So this is a Bluetooth volume wheel. It's machined out of like basically solid metal. You can see it's RGB as well, and it's got a couple of multi-function buttons on it, and then of course it's got a nice volume wheel. So when I was using this device, you can see how I can change like the volume by turning this wheel here. And then you can double click one of the buttons to change tracks. So normally when I would be like in bed using this, kind of lights off, just chilling out, and then I would just have this handy and I would just control the volume that way, and I would skip songs that way, and that's how I preferred to use it, as opposed to leaning over and swiping on this. I do feel like it would have been really sweet if the engineers of this thing would have just made the Android device if I could take it out of this thing, right? So it'd be like a phone dock almost, and I could like pull this out so I could control it that way, or maybe even have a couple of physical buttons so I wouldn't have to like look at the screen at nighttime. That would have been really neat, but maybe that's a real niche use case. But that's just how I would have preferred to use it. But again, this little Fozzy volume wheel, I'll link to it down below. Fozzy did send me that for free, but they're not asking me to do anything with it. But I did find it very useful in this situation. Done talking about use. Really full-featured device in that regard. Let's talk about sound. I feel like this thing sounds pretty darn good. Now, this is a THX amp, so it does kind of have that THX sound to it, which is to say, maybe a little more on the digital sharp side than I would prefer, but I would say by and large, Fiio does probably the best job of integrating these THX amps in affordable things that I've tested, that it's not as bad as like if you're thinking you tried THX and like the SMSL SP200 like years ago and you thought it was just too sharp. This definitely isn't as sharp leaning as that. But it is maybe a little bit sharper than some of the other solid states like my Element 3 over here. I would say this comes off a little bit sharper than that. Detail wise, I thought it sounded really good. I paired most of my listing with this. I did with the HE1000 SE. This is the Stealth, I believe is what this is. And man, what a combo. There was just a lot of times where I was sitting here listening to these guys together, and I just thought it sounded absolutely phenomenal. I would say that it doesn't pair the best with everything. Another headphone that I've been listening to a lot lately is the Headphone 2, which I reviewed a while back. I still need to review the HE1000 SE. So I guess what I would say is it sounds like a THX amps, but it sounds like one of the better THX amps that I have heard. Okay, so just a few other specs that you might want to know about this. Like I said, it's THX amps. This is the 788 Plus chipset that this is using. For DACs, it's using ES9068AS DACs, and the spec power output is around 3 watts. This thing can get up to, I imagine that's at 32 ohms, but I don't have that right in front of me. It does also note that this is running a Snapdragon 660 in here and Android 10, if you wanted to know any of that information. So where am I at on this thing after using it and as a DAC amp that comes in at about like $600? Okay, I can see Apos has like an open box for $560 here. Well, I'm looking at their website. I think if your headphones would pair good with THX, then I think it's a phenomenal choice, right? Like, I found the user experience of this thing to be really great. I really enjoyed not having to hook my phone up to it or having a computer or anything like that. I liked having all that functionality just built straight into this device. I thought with the Hifi Men stuff that I tried it with, which would be like the Organic, the Nano, and the HE1000 SE, I thought it sounded phenomenal. The wrong headphones, like the Headphone 2, come off a little bit sharp and a little bit artificial, but I did not get that at all when I was listening to, again, the majority of the time, the HE1000 SE. And I thought that this combo, when I was thinking to myself, at the time when I was filming that, I was looking up like what kind of deals there would be on the HE1000 SE, because that was sent to me by Hifi Men, so I didn't purchase those. And they were running like a refurb, I think, for maybe like $1,100-$1,200 for the HE1000 SE. And then you think about combining that with the R7 at about $550 for a refurbish. You're under $2,000 there for like a pretty phenomenal sounding system. Now, are the HE1000s gonna sound good on just about any DAC amp you put them on? Yeah, they are, for the most part. So I think there could be more like mellow listens that you could find depending on the DAC amp that you want. The other thing that I have on hand right now that I'm testing out is the Sparkos Labs Gemini. It's like their new like hybrid tube amp that they've released, but that thing runs like $1,000 and it's just an amp, but that thing sounds really, really good with the 1000 SE, and it also sounds really good with the Headphone 2. I did think that I preferred the 1000 SE better with this than with my Element 3, but I thought it was the other way around with the Headphone 2. So I can't say that it's like a perfect device and that it's going to work for everyone and every single headphone out there, but I do think it's a very unique device. I love that they've tried something different here, and I think there's probably a reasonably big market for a very functional device like this that a lot of people will want to use. And I think a lot of people would just use this on their desk too. They wouldn't even need to use necessarily the Android stuff. They just want this full featured thing to control, active speakers and their headphones and etc, etc. But I thought it was a really cool device. I think it's cool that it exists. I'd be excited to see, if they pursue this further, what, devices like this could look like in the future. Again, if you could incorporate a remote would be fantastic. And especially if you could do something like you could pop the Android device out and still control it and then set it back in, almost more like a charging dock type of a thing. If you could pull something like that off, I think it would be a really, really cool device. And, and not that it isn't already, it is. So thanks Apos for sending it out. I think Fiio's on to something here. I think, I really enjoyed my time with it. And that's partially why I took so long to review this, because I've had this for probably 3 months. But I just haven't had a lot of time, and I've honestly haven't wanted to send it back. But I guess I'm going to have to now. So, Apos, thanks for letting me use it. You guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.